isn't your typical motorsports podcast. You're listening to Crush This, a monster truck podcast presented by High Octane Coffee and J Concepts. A show where we take you inside the minds of your favorite drivers, past and present, of the monster truck industry. And now, your hosts, Brad Shaw and Dan Chichagash. Buckle in. The show starts now.
And welcome to a brand new episode of Crush This, a Monster Truck Podcast. My name is Brad Shaw, also known as the Monster Truck Canucker, and I am here with my good friend, longtime friend, co-host, guy that's, an amazing dude, Dan Chichagash. How's it going, buddy? I'll do it. I'll do it. I swear to God.
Anyway, doing pretty well. Excited about this. With this lineup, wanted to foremost, Mark Hall wanted to apologize. He had a prior engagement that got rescheduled to this date, and there was a little bit of confusion, so it was okay. Mark Hall wanted to say to all his fans and all the people that are on here, sorry, we'll see him back on, and everything else. So for me, you're just getting ready for Bloomsburg. We just heard that the lineup, we just got the buckshot truck that's going to be there. Which is pretty cool. So we're getting ready for the whole weekend, and but outside of that, enjoying our 5th day in the row with no rain.
I wish I could say the same, dude. We've been in a rainy drought. I just want to say, I see the chat. Mike Lanford, it's not orange juice. I got the good stuff today, so I got me some from some Freedom Juice. But I gotta say, with this episode, when you told me about this episode and what we were doing, I immediately just went back to nostalgia, man. This is like I've said it throughout the years that we've been doing this podcast. What we're talking about today is my favorite era in monster trucks. It's the greatest era, in my opinion.
It is. It's one of the top notch. I think one of the eras that brought out the best of everyone. Some trucks were made just for this style of racing that was ahead of its time, and it was some of the fastest trucks in the world. The fastest trucks in the world were at this venue. And the cool thing is we have one gentleman that was part of a legendary monster truck team that was the first to bring out the 3D body monster trucks. Another one ran a sub 5-second run, first time ever. And one gentleman that created a truck that I believe that was more of ahead of its time than anything else. And I think the group of people that we have here is going to be so much awesomeness. I wish Gary Lee was still around and Army Armstrong just to join in, and then we can have them ask them all the questions. And it's going to be one awesome show, which is pretty cool because this weekend they're going to be in Bloomsburg, and that's one area where the 4-wheel drive jamboree still going on. So we have a little intro video, Brad, and then we'll play that and we'll bring in our guest.
Yeah, and huge shout out to Nick Davis from Back Channel Productions for making this intro video. Where is it? Right there. Go check them out on YouTube. Go check out what they're doing, man. So yeah, we'll play this intro and then we'll bring in our guests one by one. We'll do a little intro for each of them. All right, guys, stay tuned. All right, Cheech, introduce our first guest. We'll bring in one by one, doing kind of old school intros here. So go ahead, Mr. Cheech.
Well, this gentleman was part of the legendary Bigfoot fleet. He drove the original slithering snake, and they know him as the Colt Cobra. And he drove that truck for a while. Then he drove the legendary Big Blue Ford. around the 93 area. And after that became pretty much a pretty awesome crew chief. And he's still been around in the monster truck area for the rest of his life right now, I guess. But that's none other than Mr. Gene Patterson. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Watching that intro video, if that doesn't give you chills and spills, that's just like, you're not human if it doesn't make the hair stand up anymore. That's an era that will live forever. That's just awesome. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Next one on our list, this gentleman's from Texas, and outside of known for a lot of the Thunder Nationals series, but he was also known to bring created some of the top trucks in the PENDA Points Championship. Had numerous drivers to drive his trucks, but he was been doing it even before the PENDA Championships with the 4-wheel drive jamborees. And I call him a really good friend, and that's Mr. Marty Garza. How you doing, sir?
How you doing, guys? Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. Hey,
with these distinguished guests.
And last but not least, this gentleman, his introduction is, I'm sweating already, but he made tons of competitive trucks and probably a lot of championships underneath his belt. He was also, we're asked about the story, the first gentleman to run a sub 5-second run in his monster truck. And he owns and operates the Samson monster truck, Mr. Dan Patrick. How you doing, sir?
There he is.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing pretty well. Pretty well. Yeah. But yes, so
it's storming here, so my
so the internet's a little choppy.
Yeah, it's just storming here, so we'll be kind of in and out. So you'll have to bear with me.
Oh, no worries, man. We're just excited to have all you guys here. Kind of, social distancing quite a bit with how far the distance away. But, it's as Gene was saying, that video just gets you fired up. Even though there were some nasty spills in it, it just gets, like, even me just nostalgic. I remember being a little skinny old brat just sitting in front of the TV watching TNN and being like, whoa, this is the greatest stuff in the world. I still think of that today. So, thank you guys for being able to do this with us tonight.
Not a problem.
So I'll start off with the questionnaire. And my first question, we'll start off with Marty, and then if Dan wants to answer that, and then Gene, we'll go in that order. And I was just wondering, what was the PENDA Points Championship meant to you?
Well, obviously that was like the cream of the crop in terms of competitive monster trucks. I mean, I don't know that there's ever been that level of competition that an entire field was separated by fractions of a second. It spurred a tremendous amount of development. It really changed the industry. Obviously, leading up to it, the precursor to it would have been the TNT, the TNT series, TNT Motorsports. They ran their series for a couple of years, and it spurred the change that caused monster trucks to change from just being like car crushers into more of a competition type vehicle. But by the time the PENDA Point series started, it really changed the face of what competition was going to be like for quite some time. It was an amazing time. I'm blessed to have been involved and got to see these guys go out there and destroy their stuff, trying to beat each other. It was amazing.
Dan?
Well, the thing is with the PENDA Point series, it was kind of the common denominator of our industry. When I worked at Bigfoot, we spent everything focused the whole year on just that 5-weekend series. And, then when I left and came back, on my own, You spent the whole year gearing up for this thing. You couldn't wait to get there. And no matter how stressful and frustrating it was by the end of the weekend, you couldn't wait to come back for the next one. And on the way home, you're thinking, okay, I got to change this, got to do this, got to do this. But when you would be at a pit party, any other event, and people were always asking you, how you doing in the PENDA series? Because that was the only thing was on television at the time. It aired, it was 13 events out of 5 weekends, but it repeated, so it was on every weekend, and plus repeated it a couple other times. So it was the common denominator, and it was something you just wanted to be part of.
And Gene?
Good answers from the other two guys. I don't even know how you follow up something like that. Yeah, Dan hit it right on the head. When the TNT, going back to the TNT, they started out and they made a lot of household names too. A lot of these guys, it seems like everybody had a monster truck. So the guys like John Breen and John Moore and even Gary Porter and all those guys started out with those smaller tracks with TNT. And I think as it progressed and George Carpenter came in and the special events, they'd always had monster trucks at their events prior to that. But they wanted to take it to the next level. And with the timing equipment that we incorporated into that, with reaction times and you'd go back and you'd study, and like Dan said, I mean, we packed everything up from St. Louis when we went to these events because this was one of the true televised event you could get. And when you had major sponsors, in fact, we hooked up some new sponsors because of television, and it was, like Marty said, also cream of the crop. I mean, we started it. Pro MT tried to go that direction, but I don't think they'll be ever be matched to what was being developed back then. And nobody really saw it. As a driver, I didn't see it, but I really enjoyed being involved in it.
So my first question kind of has to deal with, you were mentioning there a little bit, Gene, with sponsorship. So my question, first one is, and we'll go in reverse. We'll go Gene, then Dan, and then Marty. We'll go in kind of reverse order. So how is it having, it's kind of a two-parter. So how is it having exposure with TNN and Diamond P Motorsports kind of handling, the broadcasting? And was that, and the second part of that is, how much easier was that to attract, sponsors? You had John Moore with the HPX Corporation. That was a major sponsor because they sponsored like John Force and a lot of the drag racers. How did kind of both those kind of coincide with each other?
Well, of course, we were at that time sponsored by Ford and Firestone tires that came on, and we had Trailmaster shock absorbers, and we had a multitude of sponsorships. But with the Snakebite machine, that went in line with the Hot Wheels toy line that came out that year, and it had Bigfoot and Snakebite. And as the TV exposure gained from Snakebite, and the guy that wasn't such a great driver, but he seemed to make the highlight reel quite often, we were able to pick up Brass Eagle paintball sponsorship, which is totally outside of the motorsport region, but they actually contacted us and wanted to be part of the monster truck racing program. And like you said, with John Moore, and a lot of these guys were pushed in front of the TV cameras, and Army and his whole crew coaxed everybody on how to be a better speaker and how to go out here and attract sponsorships. And you had guys like Keen Crunch with Scott Stevens, and it just kept growing. It seemed like week and week and week. And as soon as something would be televised, it just seemed like the phone would not stop ringing just from people wanting to be involved in this exciting new form of motorsport racing.
And Dan?
Well, mine was a little different. I was trying to promote my business, and also my goal was, at the time where we're looking for more bookings, because, back then, there was a lot of shows, but nothing like there is today. So it helped you with name recognition. Your performance fees went up. You were in more demand. So, you went from doing maybe 20 events a year to now starting doing 40 and 50 events a year. So that was mine. Then, people want to buy my products and stuff or have me build trucks. So, mine was a whole different thing. So it was all about building my business more about than at that time sponsorships, because sponsorships were very, very hard to come by.
And Marty.
This, as Gene and Dan were speaking, it kind of occurred to me how it's kind of an interesting thing how this worked out, because we each represent the very far extremes of what was going on during that time. Gene, was behind the wheel of a heavily sponsored team where, they would show up. I mean, you talk about intimidation factor. They roll in not only with top-notch equipment, but they would roll in with a semi and trailer with nothing but spare parts, axles, complete end-to-end, John Causey Hemis, injector to pan. I mean, the best of everything. They were loaded for bear, and literally. And we show up and we're racing out of our back pocket. So, I look back at it and I'm amazed that we were able to be as successful as we were. But we recognized, very early on, we recognized that we had to pick our battles. We couldn't afford to go out there and run the truck 100% every round, or we would never make the whole series. I mean, we got a lot of breakage, but I don't know that people quite grasp the torture that the trucks went through, running them wide open on those long tracks, pass after pass after pass like that. It's really hard on the truck. So we had to kind of pick our battles, and we knew where our strengths were for extreme. Kirk and I kind of strategized that the courses with the bigger jumps kind of went in our favor. The super speedway tracks, we knew we were out horsepowered. Those John Causey Hemis were just wicked. So it was quite a contrast. You saw that, and then I think Dan should point out that he's building a business, but he's also at the very same time completely changing the monster truck industry, because prior to that, there was no standardization. Every truck was completely different than every other. They shared no components. It's not like you broke a part and you could just run and borrow one from a competitor like we do nowadays. At that time, the trucks, even within the same team, a team that might have two trucks at the event, parts wouldn't interchange between those two trucks. So Dan really put the mechanism in place to advance the sport to the level that it's actually achieved today. There's a lot more to it. I guess there's a lot of things that were going on in the background that may not have been quite so obvious to the spectators.
So this one, I will start off with Dan, Patrick, and then we'll go with Gene, and then we'll end again with Marty. I was just curious about, this is my question. I was just curious, what commonly broke the most on your guys' trucks? Let's see if Dan, if you want to answer that.
With me, when we had such a what's that?
Oh, there's just a little bit of a lag. My bad. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Well, with me is like when Gene was with me at the time, so my whole PENDA series was involved with Gene, except for when I was at Bigfoot. Gene had left Bigfoot by the time I got into the series. So when we went to Bloomsburg and had our kind of Cinderella weekend, we didn't, we couldn't keep a tire on the wheel, but we didn't really have any breakage. But we went to Springfield the next weekend, and we just shelled out axles after axles. And actually, I started the season with 5 extra axles. And I went through them all except for one in Springfield. Then we had to go to Canfield for a 4-show weekend. And so, when I was doing so much with SCS back then, there was no way, because we used to get 5-ton axles and get them remachined, reheat treated and all that. There was no time for that. So we had to get creative and I made straight axles. And so I took the U-joint deal out, or the ball and claw, and then I made a straight axle. And then because we just didn't have any time, there was no parts available, so you had to make everything. And when I went to Canfield, like I say, it was a 4-show weekend. After the second show, I told Gene, I can't take this anymore. This is brutal. You're going to have to drive. And he started doing things and made me stay in the seat, and it all worked out. But it was a learning curve in it back then because, like you say, like Marty says, we didn't have these things off the shelf. So you had to do all this, and see, 3 weekends were in a row. I mean, you had Bloomsburg, Springfield, and Canfield, and that was, 7 races, 8 races. So, I mean, it was brutal.
Gene?
Okay. I think, well, when we first started, when we had number 8 in Memphis, our weak link was the transmissions, the C6s. We're using some beefed up parts, but as Marty contested to earlier also and attested to it and said, we were developing a truck for the series, but we were also trying to, win with what we had brought. And slowly but surely we were changing so much where the transmission become bulletproof. But then it went down to the axles, and with the new ZFs, we were breaking a lot of the little short stubby axles. So like Dan said, you couldn't just call up and order these. You had to get them made. And there's a certain time constraint. It's not as like PEI is now, where but he still's got to engineer the parts. But you've got, we didn't have 5, 6 CNC machines sitting there at our shop. It was like, how do we make this part better and make it withstand in what we were doing? That was our biggest thing, was the transmissions. And I think over the years that's been, guys tried Linkos, Dan tried Linkos. Guys are running the power, I guess they're called Power Glides now. And they seem to be holding up pretty well, but I've seen a lot of stuff online where when they do blow, they're gone. And that's really the only thing. I remember in Bloomsburg, like Marty said earlier, about being loaded when we rolled the whole back end off of the truck, and everybody went home thinking, man, we got a cakewalk tomorrow because Bigfoot won't be in the run. And I was driving. We literally stayed up all night and rebuilt the whole back end, all new shocks, motor, tranny, come back next day, and it just knocked the wind out of everybody's sails. But that was Bob's analogy, was, we just had to win. We wanted to win all the time at no cost. It didn't matter what the cost was, just go out to win.
And Marty?
With overkill, or what should I say, with extreme overkill, the biggest weak link in that truck, because of the, it's pretty unusual truck with a lot of wheel travel. And I think that probably the component we had the most issue with would have been drive lines. We had a lot of issues with 38 inches of wheel travel in the back and 32 in the front. We had a hard time keeping U-joints. And at that time, we were still experimenting with 2-piece drive shafts. So we actually ran a mid shaft. We didn't run a jack shaft like what we run now. That's just a spline shaft. So we had issues with carrier bearings, and because that's running them like that, it turns out to be a pretty heavy drive line. And as long as they were, and going the type of speeds we are and spinning them as fast as we are, that created a lot of issues with drive lines. It was also, pretty early time for components like sway bars. I guess there's another example of things that we just take for granted today. Around that time, the idea of running sway bars was pretty new. There weren't a lot of trucks running them, and everybody was kind of making their own. They were getting, couplers splined, and you could buy the spline sway bar, but you had to make your own links and everything. And little by little, Dan kind of saw that opportunity and started creating something that we were having a hard time developing on our own. He had the ability to produce lots of parts for lots of trucks. So little by little, they got better and better, and he kind of perfected that technology. And that's why they're extremely reliable today. They all kind of started right at that Penda days,
All right, so my next question, I have a couple of driver-specific questions. And my first one is for Gene, or, the alter ego Colt Cobra. So what was going through your mind as, the people at Bigfoot were kind of telling you about the idea of snake bite and the whole Colt Cobra character, and how much Because like I'm an old school wrestling fan. I love wrestling. So how much was your ideas put into the character as Colt Cobra? Did you have like certain things that you would want to do, like the fangs, or like what kind of was the whole idea behind everything?
Well, it basically was just they gave me free reign. When the toy was being developed, when they actually sent it to our shop and sent us the drawing, everybody in the shop was totally against it. Roy, Jay, there's just no way they wanted to produce this truck. Bob said, I think it can be done. My wife, Susan, at the time, we kind of liked the idea. I thought it was a kind of a goofy kind of, okay, we'll do this. But the thing with Hot Wheels and any type of toy that's out there right now, you have to have a good guy and a bad guy, because the kid's not going to go buy just one. So it was marketed towards the children and the kids, because they're going to have to buy both of the vehicles, because you got to have your good guy and your bad guy. When we went to Memphis, on the way to Memphis, I just was running on steam, basically, just no energy left. We'd been building the truck, and we came up with the name. Andy and myself, we were talking back and forth on the CB radio, and I came up with the name Colt Cobra from Cobra Creek, Colorado. And it was the announcers could never get your name right. Even Dan, Marty knows this. You fill out bio sheets all the time. You give them to the announcers, and they just, no offense, Dan, Cheech, but you guys just say what you guys want to say. So they would have to say my name, Colt Cobra from Cobra Creek, Colorado. When I stepped out to go do the first photo shoot, I just pulled a regular head sock on, never even had any intention, not knowing. And from that moment on, I knew, like my wife says, a star is born, and it's like, oh my God, what have we created? And it's something that's still talked about today. So we're on the cusp of something good, but we're also on the cusp of something bad, because a lot of guys really thought that it was a bad image for the monster truck industry. But, that truck is still much talked about today, and what it did. And none of it was intentional. But Dan knows from being around me and working, when I've worked side by side with Dan, when the chips are down, you can always count on me for a good laugh. And if you can't have fun out there doing what you're doing, then you might as well just go find something else to do.
Once again, we're going to do a solo question, and this is for Mr. Dan Patrick. The story behind your first sub 5 second run.
Well, before I get into that, I want to add a little bit to Gene's comment. When we worked at Bigfoot, every morning at 10:40, we had our morning break. And so we would sit around a table, and there would be Gene, Andy Brass, Mike Brass, Andy's brother, Ron Bachman, and several others. And these guys would talk wrestling, and I would just get so aggravated listening to this crap, wrestling and all this. And they'd get so animated. So when this thing all kind of come around, Gene was just perfect for this. And I mean, just was consumed with it. And I mean, he was the ideal person to launch that. And if he didn't do it, it would have never become what it is. And he just was that persona and made it what it is. So, so you got to give Gene all the credit for this, because it wasn't real embraced in the shop at the time. So, but it became very, very popular very quick. Back to the sub-second thing, 5 second thing. Starting out that weekend, I couldn't even get down the track. I was running 6.2s, and I mean, it was just awful. And I'm up, and Gene, and we're trying to figure out, why won't this thing run? Of course, Bigfoot had all the budget and all these motors and stuff. When I put that truck together, we were running so behind all that. I didn't have a motor ready, so I went and pulled the motor out of my funny car puller. Hadn't run in 4 years, and throwed it in a truck. So it was pretty tired, but it was still a good motor for what it was. But anyway, I completely went through the whole truck motor that night, and then we qualified 12th, and then we went out, and I found the glitch. There was a check valve in the fuel system backwards. So I flipped that around and I thought, well, we'll just get through the day and we'll qualify better tonight, for the Sunday race. Well, I went out and that's when we're lucky to beat all 3 Bigfoot trucks 4 times in a row to get the win on Saturday. And then, so on Sunday, when we went to qualify, we actually qualified number 2. Dan Runte qualified number 1. But the way the Hemis are, the hotter the motor, the more horsepower they produce. And so it was a hot day. And so we went out and I could just tell it was a really, really good run. But when I come back to the pits, I saw Gene doing a dance. I thought that must have been a pretty good run. And then that's when the thing was under 5 seconds. So if we could have kept the tires on it that day on the back, we kept spinning the wheels, tires off the wheels. But I think we would have been a faster time. Dan Runte ended up being faster at the end of the day, but we were still the first one to get there.
So my next question is for Marty, and so talk about the competitive nature of the PENDA series, and also the camaraderie between everybody, because they played a lot of rivalries on TV. The Barefoot Fred Schaefer and the Bigfoot Camp, and they played a lot of rivalries, but I probably think there was a lot of camaraderie between everybody. Like everybody got along, and also like everybody was competitive. When you put the helmets on, it's kind of that saying, when the helmet's on, the BS stops, and you guys are just going at it. So talk about kind of both things there.
I think you had a little bit of both going on. I mean, obviously for television, they tend to create and trust me, they purposely will prod you to try to get you to say something to offend another competitor, and a lot of it's for television, but there were, I think it's pretty well known, there were some serious rivalries that were not, in fact they might have been more heated off screen than on television, but it made it interesting. It definitely made the shows interesting. Now keep in mind that there was so much going on. The competition was so, taken so seriously that there wasn't a lot of, horsing around. I think when we were there, you were there to do your job and you kind of focused on what needed to be done. I don't remember a lot of downtime. We do multiple shows over the weekend, and unfortunately end up spending a lot of time wrenching and a lot of times you'd like to be tuning to go faster, and you're just trying to not lose ground. You're just trying to keep the truck going. Dan mentioned he was having issues with traction rate. At that time, we're all trying to reduce our unsprung mass. We're trying to reduce our rotating mass. We're going to, lighter tires, cutting bars, and here comes Dan with his set of XT Goodyears, 980 pound Goodyears on the back of his truck. And he's going faster than us. And you're just scratching your head like, what are we doing wrong here?
And speaking about that in track,
plus I had three-piece wheels too.
Yeah, see, and that's what we kept spinning. We kept spinning the O-rings out of them old 3-piece big heavy steel wheels. And so then we just started putting the O-rings around the axle and hang 2 extra O-rings on there. So when he'd come back from making a pass, we'd hurry up and slip another O-ring in, and we eventually just run out of time. You just can't keep doing that, because as the bracket would continue on, your time in between rounds gets less and less. But guys were just shaking their heads, because here we are with this truck out here with these big old heavy wheels and tires, and we're out here trying to put O-rings, and they're sitting over scratching their head. How's this truck going that fast? It's crazy.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of little stories, little trivia, just useless knowledge, I guess, or useless memories. To me, I find that those are the things that stick with me, because they're the things that probably aren't real well known. There are a lot of little things that would go on behind the scenes, things that were seemingly illogical, that we were trying to make the trucks go faster. And there was so much experimentation going on at that time. The trucks maybe on television may not have looked different from week to week. They might have looked fairly similar, but there were actually a lot of little changes going on, tweaking things, just trying to make make the truck just get that extra, 0.2 of a second, or if that, 1/10 of a second was a lot. When you got up to the upper brackets there.
And off the chain.
Well, when I won there on Saturday afternoon.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
When I won there on Saturday afternoon, the first thing they did goes, he's too light, he's illegal. So they went and weighed us. We had to take all the trucks over after they're all hot and everything. Had to drive halfway across the fairgrounds in Bloomsburg and weigh them. In one, I weighed 11,200 pounds. They didn't weigh trucks anymore. And I couldn't believe that I went that fast at 11,200 pounds.
Oh,
and actually, it was, in hindsight, it's what made the truck work, because it made the clutch do its job, and it was just a great combination. So that next week we go to Springfield with one-piece wheels on it, and it didn't go as fast.
Monster trucks have always defied physics.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But here's off the camaraderie question. I just want to know, where was some of your favorite places to race at? We'll start with Gene, and then we'll go Marty and Dan.
Indianapolis has to be probably one of my favorites. Just for the simple, Indianapolis will always be considered the racing capital of the world. And when I won there in '93, I believe it was, that was huge. I wasn't a big fan of Canfield. The 4 shows in 3 days. It's just a lot of work. Like Dan said, there's a drop off on one side. Bloomsburg, there's a dip at the end. Indy seemed like it was the perfect combination. Springfield, Missouri used to have a good track, but then, we went away from there. But I would probably say Indianapolis, just for the simple fact that the fans that come to the Jamboree there are second to, Bloomsburg, of course. But the track was always superb there every time. It didn't matter if it was pouring down rain when I won or if it was dry. I mean, it seemed like everybody brought their best when they went to Indianapolis.
Marty?
I would have to agree. From a historical standpoint, Indy was always kind of the pinnacle of racing, and that went back even prior to PENDA. I'm talking even back at Marion County Fairgrounds. That was always, the show you didn't want to miss. So from a historical standpoint, I would say definitely Indy. Obviously, me personally, Las Vegas is my favorite place to race. We've done well there. I also enjoyed racing in Orlando. The crowds in Orlando are just fanatical for monster trucks. It's probably one of the best places if you're a true monster truck fan and you want to hang out with people of, like-minded individuals, Orlando's a good place too. So that's kind of the three, or is that central, eastern, and western?
Gotcha. And Dan?
I'm kind of all over the place. As far as PENDA series, Bloomsburg was my favorite. It was kind of a love-hate relationship there. It was either really well, or sometimes I got it right in the ambulance to the hospital. But stadium-wise, Metrodome was definitely my favorite with USA, and then Montreal was a big favorite of mine. And I did very well at both places. In Las Vegas, prior to US Hot Rod, I did really well there. And so those would have been my favorites. I mean, I always look forward to going to those places, but, I've been fortunate to race all over North America. And so, but there's also places that you just never did well at. So, but Bloomsburg was my favorite PENDA.
All right. So my question for Dan is, so when I first saw you come into the PENDA series, you were under the American Gladiator sponsorship. And how did that come about? And then how did the transition to Samson come about? Because it was, having a sponsor for the TV show at the time, American Gladiators, that was kind of a big thing, I would imagine, so back in the day.
Actually, I got zero money doing the PENDA series for running the American Gladiator body. That was a USA promotional deal that I did with USA after the core sponsorship. So that really only benefited me there. They actually were insistent that I go do the PENDA thing, which I wanted to do anyway. So we went to the very first one without Samson on the truck, and I thought, if I've got to fund this out of my pocket, then it's going to have Samson on it, because at the time American Gladiators had their own names for their their actors or their talent, stuff like that. So we put the name on before we went to Bloomsburg, and I figured if it's coming out of my pocket, then it's having my name on it. So one thing kind of led to another, and that's where that was conceived.
Now, one of my this is a question for Gene. What the story behind and what happened at Williams Grove, 91?
You mean Union Grove, Wisconsin?
Union Grove, yes. My bad.
Okay, well, hang on. I give a shout out to my main man down there in Florida, the Sin Man, Jeff Sin. Hey Jeff. I also got another good friend of mine heading to Bloomsburg this weekend. He's going to make hay when the hay, he's ready to shine. Cody Saucier is going to sit in somebody else's seat this weekend. That's a true racer.
Oh, Cody.
This guy,
Absolutely.
He's not willing to sit on the sidelines and let this COVID kick him in the butt. He wants to be out there behind the wheel of a monster truck. Going back to the question, well, we were running a leaf spring truck, and there was about a 50-50 mix, I think, that year of leaf springs. And like Marty said earlier, guys were trying so much different stuff. Scott Stevens was running cantilevers with conventional off-the-shelf shocks, and everybody's trying something. And that truck, I don't know what it was at Union Grove that they changed. Either they shortened the distance, they did something different that nobody really was aware of until after my run. But when the back end on the leaf spring truck with the nitrogen shock on it, we had such long leafs that if it would catch the down ramp, if you didn't go down the down ramp, it would catch like the last car and the big dirt ramp. And then afterwards, George would always go back and cut that out, because the car wouldn't roll out because it would hit that dirt ramp and it would just flip you up in the air. The RI system that we ran back then, a lot of guys, I say a lot of guys, I had my hands full inside the truck, and you would count on somebody else shutting the truck off. That's not the way you need to drive these machines today. And a lot of guys will reset theirs now and just continue on. Back then, I just had my head up my rear, and when the back end throws you up in the air, your natural instinct is to try to power out of it. And when I powered out and the steering cylinder broke and the rear end kicked around, next thing I know, I'm ordering vanilla ice cream and there's nobody home.
That's awesome. I mean, it's one of the memories that.
Yeah. And what people didn't even realize, because they didn't even show it the day before, that at the end of the run, we actually got it up on its sidewalls before the sidewall thing was a thing, which is what everybody does today. And on a 12,000 pound vehicle, we had it on its side, and we actually powered out of it, pulled it around to the other side. And then that's when George Carpenter shut me off, and it did a slow roll over on the right side of the machine that day. And that's a lot of stuff that was lost. I mean, Dan knows from Indianapolis the one year we're out there qualifying in the dark, and Dan and Andy are setting up at the trailer, and they go, "Is that Gene out there still running?" We're like, "Yeah, we're playing the brackets. We're trying to get these trucks." Like Marty said, there's a lot of stuff people did not see back then. And I mean, it was, you wanted to be in the right spot in the bracket. You didn't take anybody for granted, but obviously as a team, when we went to a lot of these tracks, we wanted to meet at the end if at all possible. But yeah, the Union Grove thing, it's just another highlight reel that just won't go away. It just hangs on to me all the
time. Brad, you got any more questions?
Yeah, I want to ask Gene about driving Bigfoot number 4. which had the snake bite body on it. That truck is in the history of monster trucks. Like there's so many like Bigfoot 4's power rotates the earth, and there's so many like Chuck Norris related things to Bigfoot 4. How was driving that truck? Because at the time, John Pyatt, drove it before, and they had did a lot of the changes on it. Switched it over to alcohol and added different shocks on it. So it was kind of like almost like a hybrid truck. I feel like between how Bigfoot 8 was. How was that to drive? Was it a very tricky truck to drive compared to the other trucks, or was it something that you were up to the task for?
Yeah, it was really loose, and Dan knows because Dan helped build that truck. He did some testing out there in front of the old shop up there on Lindbergh and jumping across the ditch for car crushing and whatnot. And Marty knows too. In the early days, the trucks were so hard on the body. We didn't have the Hans devices. We didn't have these the hooker harnesses that guys are running. We didn't have the containment seats. We had whatever you could go buy off the shelf. We run the suspension seats, which is what the off-road racers would run. So we thought, hey, if it works for them, it'll work for us. Well, we didn't know that, your body is acting like a shock absorber. And to me, I never felt 100% comfortable behind the wheel of that truck. Each one of the trucks had their own personality. And it seemed like the truck was really advanced for a leaf spring truck, but it was also, it still needed a lot of refinement done to it. So I felt when I stepped into number 9, that was just like putting a letter in an envelope. I mean, that was it. That truck fit me. The truck was laid out right. I mean, your legs were always cramped up in it. You felt like your feet were under you. Felt like you was driving a sprint car. And you guys know how guys drive sprint cars, which I don't know how they do them, but your knees were up to your chest. And it just never really handled. One set of cars was good. Andy did an exceptional job with it in Louisville at the figure 8 race, but we only had the back end. We only had it back half then. We didn't have the whole package. And I think Dan went down there, and that's when we first put it on fuel injection. And it took a long time to get it running. And Andy always told me that. Just keep your foot on the floor. It'll be fine. And it's like, no, we couldn't keep tires on it. We couldn't keep nothing on that truck.
Man, speaking about how the PENDA series helped you guys, each one of you guys, I believe, drove a truck that the series kind of helped involve. This question is for all three of you, and we'll go with Marty, Dan, and then Gene again. And the trucks that I was mentioning is Extreme Overkill for Marty. Dan, your Samson 3, Samson 3, but your full racing truck. And then Gene, Bigfoot 10 or Bigfoot 11. Go ahead and basically the story behind those trucks. Go first, Marty.
Okay, I'm going to try to give you an abbreviated version because that's a pretty long, drawn-out story. But
yeah,
unlike Dan and Gene, I never drove a leaf spring truck, monster truck, obviously. So even my first truck was really designed to be ahead of the curve. It was designed at the time when Bigfoot 4 and USA 1 were dominating. So from the outset, I was trying to design something that was a step ahead of everything that was in competition. Unfortunately, the amount of time it took to build it, you had the debut of Taurus 3, and shortly after that you had Bigfoot 8. So the whole game changed. So in my opinion, I built a truck that was obsolete from the day it debuted. So I was already looking to build something better immediately. And that's what led to the development of Maximum. And there were a lot of experimental concepts that were kind of, added to that design. I wasn't sure how they were going to be received, so it was kind of a watered down version of what I really wanted to do. And as soon as that truck, the first time you ride in a truck that's got rail suspension, you're like, okay, this is the direction we want to go, because it was, light years difference. And so immediately the plans got started for what became Extreme. And then obviously there were setbacks, and there were many versions of Extreme that didn't get built. Some other versions that kind of did sort of get built, but it was designed to be very specific. I saw the future at that time. I saw PENDA as being the future of the sport. I really wanted to race. I'm a racer. I wanted to race, and that's, I built a machine that I thought was going to do very well in that environment. And I had to make a few compromises, because obviously with my relationship with Aaron and Becky Polburn, we definitely wanted to be able to do the Thunder Nationals. So the car had, the truck had to be able to hit fresh cars. And, I was very concerned about the belly hitting the concrete. I didn't want to do building damage. So, that kind of constrained the wheel travel. I might have gone a little bit more if I hadn't been worried about the chassis hitting the concrete and things like that. But, it had a multitude of ideas that had never been done. The spread cradle design, the bypass shocks, the air springs, the air bump stops, and the short C6. We took the tail housing out off the transmission and shortened it up considerably, trying to reduce the distance from the front of the motor to the back of the transfer case. There was a lot of things in addition to the obvious thing of it being super low. And, that thing had at full compression, axle center line was like 3 inches above crank center line. The idea being that under a hard landing, it would act almost like a keel effect, kind of like a weeble wobble. It doesn't want to fall over because of the weight. The center of gravity is below the axle center line. But in the real world, monster trucks don't, like I said, they defy physics. And sometimes the things that it'll never do that. Yeah, sure enough, that's the first thing it do. So that's sort of the quick version of it.
And Dan?
Well, when I built my first suspension truck, which was chassis 13, as far as trucks I had built or vehicles I had built, I spent about a year. I was traveling, still using my old spring truck and stuff like that. So I spent about a year building that, because I didn't have the technology like Marty and Bob had with computers and all that. Mine was strings and dirt and nails dragged in the dirt and just all kinds of crude stuff. But I definitely had goals.
Brains.
I wanted, when the truck completely compressed, I wanted to only have like 4 inches off the ground in the cradle. And I liked the spread cradle a little better. I didn't really understand why we had to have 70-inch long 4-link bars when you only have 25 inches of travel. So I shortened the bars up to 57 inches. And then I actually built the truck originally with a Chevrolet with an automatic in it. And I realized I wasn't going to be competitive with that program. So I went back to the Hemis, like I ran in the Polars at the time. And I had 4 automatic transmissions to keep one truck going. And I thought, I don't have time to change transmissions because I'm a one-man show. And so I went and invested in a slipper clutch, which I used in pulling. And then I started out with a 3-speed Lenco, then went to the 4-speed Lenco because I could rebuild it at the track if I needed to. So there was a lot of that. And the cantilever I used in the back, and I actually asked Bob Chandler for permission to do that because he had patented it. And I liked that in number 10 and 11 because I did build 10, but I just did the chassis and stuff on 11. So it was all about keeping the back tires on the ground because the PENDA series, when the light turned green, actually when it turned yellow, you left and you didn't leave off the throttle until you passed the finish line, no matter what shape you were in. Because if you let off, you were done. You were beat. So there was a lot of that going into it. And some of it was hit and miss, but I was fortunate that it was more hit than not. So, and that of all the trucks I've ever built, that is still my favorite. and I wish I still had that truck. Many of these days down at the park, that amusement park in Atlanta, I'll steal it one night when nobody's around.
Well, I'd have to say, Cheech, you said about like 10 and 11. 9, and I feel like 9 was the workhorse for us. We could run a 500 cubic incher, we could run a 540, and that truck was just wicked. I don't know what the combination was. I know it had mild steel, it had chromoly, it had all kinds of stuff done to it. It would take a beating and just keep on ticking, like the old Timex commercial would. And I just loved that truck so much. When I stepped into 10, I had to readjust because I had a motor behind me now, and you have in your center seat, you have to learn how to completely drive all over again. And it was, at the time, we were so busy. We were just making trucks, and there were subtle changes that we were making, but the demand for displays and the demand from other promoters, I mean, we couldn't just keep going. The PENDA series, like I showed you earlier, I mean, I still got the rules from 91, 92, and 93. I mean, we had open qualifying. We tried open qualifying. So they were so far ahead, but there was guys, you didn't have time just to sit back and think, oh, I work for Bigfoot, nothing's going to happen, because you got guys like Dan, you got guys like Marty, you got guys like Hall Brothers. They're out there nipping at your heels, and they're trying stuff. If you're sitting in your trailer watching movies, they're out there working on their trucks, and they're coming after you. So, I mean, 10 was a decent truck. If you treated it rough, like I used to call it back slap you, it hit you in the back of the head, and it let you know, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. And you had to respect it. I think each vehicle has its own entity, whenever you start talking about stuff like that. I mean, they have their own feelings, and you have to respect those vehicles, because the minute you start abusing those, they're gonna come back and get you really quick.
So, Cheech, any more questions, or are we gonna go into kind of story time here?
We'll go a little bit of story time here.
Alrighty. So what we're gonna do is we'll start off with Dan, and then kind of just go kind of in a order there, and just like talk about like a unique story or tidbits or just stuff that a lot of fans really don't know about the PENDA series. So we'll start off with Dan on this one.
Well, I suppose Bloomsburg '94 would be my, G and I, it was a roller coaster ride. We went there, of course, when G and I would go to a PENDA race, we left with just enough time to get there because we worked on, Gene would come in the shop early, a couple days early, and we would just work on everything. Gene would take all the shocks apart, and of course, we joked one day at the shop one time, Jim Kramer was working on the shock, and it was bypassed, and it blew oil all over the ceiling in the shop. And of course, we joked about that. And so we were at my shop, and we were joking about that. And I was outside, and I heard a boom. And I come in, and there's oil dripping off my ceiling from the shock. And he says, "Don't even say a word." And so that was on our way to, I think, Bloomsburg. But we would literally leave at midnight to get to Bloomsburg by 9 o'clock in the morning. But I guess my moment, we had such a great weekend, and we were at the truck stop eating, that was your big payoff for the weekend, when you could go to the Petro or the Flying J and get a real meal. And so I said, Bob's going to be pretty upset about this weekend, and since we had a really good weekend, and he's going to home and get the checkbook out, and they're going to come to Springfield with a whole new program, and we'll never probably see semifinal rounds again. There's so many stories, and so many of them with me and Gene, of course, and he made that whole series so much fun for me. And if it wouldn't been for him, I wouldn't have done as well, because there was just times when we would be up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning working on trying to figure out how to do better. And so, kudos to Gene for that. And like you say, I'd get him home, get him on a plane on his way back home, and then we would just get up for the next one.
Marty.
Well, for Extreme Overkill to even have been able to compete in PENDA, the backstory of that was probably the highlight for me. I mean, obviously, I'm sure most of your viewers know about the fire and all, but which was a huge setback. But coming back from that, Jerry Richmond and I, we were dead set on building this machine that we'd spent so much time in trying to develop. We had all these plans and all this technology, and we're like, we can't just let it go to waste. We got to do this thing. So in a matter of, let me see, the fire was on April 2nd. By October, Jerry built a brand new shop. By the end of by early October, we started on Extreme and had the truck in testing by mid-December. And I mean, it's hard to put into words the amount of effort that it took to do that. We operated with like no sleep, hours upon hours standing at the drill press, drilling holes with hole saws and things. It's not like today you draw something up on the computer, you send it to the plasma cutter or the laser jet, it spits out as many as you want, you jig them up, and it's a done deal. Or you pick up the phone, you call Dan, hey Dan, send me this. That we made every single component by hand. Every hole was drilled by hand. It was a whole different world. It quite literally was an unimaginable task to be able to build such an exotic machine in that short amount of time, with the amount of labor force that we had, which was primarily just Jerry and I. We did have friends that would come in after work and lend a hand, and towards the end they helped out a lot, getting the body mounted and things like that. But the real hard, cutting, drilling, welding, bending tubing, all that stuff, was just Jerry and I in the shop, just sleepless nights, night after night after night. And every once in a great while, we decided, okay, hold, stop everything. Time to jump on the four-wheelers and go out and clear our heads for 30 minutes, So we'd go out in the trails and play around, come back all muddy and get back to work. But at least we'd, clear our mind. And every once in a while, Gene and Dan know this very well. You'll be working on something and you just reach an impasse. You just can't get past, like, I cannot do this. Something's not, you're trying to jig something up. It will not work no matter what. And you just have to step away for a few minutes and come back, and it just falls right into place. So, but that time, all that effort that went into building that was probably the standout for me.
And Gene?
Well, I think one of the things that Dan was missing, and I appreciate all the kind words, Dan, but when he went to Bloomsburg, first he was at, I think it was Lima, and he just barely made it there, and everybody pitched in to help him tire up the truck with the new truck, and he went out there, and he was just whipped from getting that truck put together. And the Steve Woods from USA Motorsports was pushing him really hard to get this truck out there. And shortly after that, when the Bloomsburg event came and I was left looking for something else to do, and Dan said, well, come on out here and we'll get this thing together. I walked into Dan's old shop and his truck was pushed over in the corner. The half of the frame was cut off so we could get the valve covers off. The motor was tore apart. He was on the phone with a guy in California to come up with a cam. But meantime, he's over working on a customer's components to get them going. And that's the way he does today. He always pushes his stuff to the side until the last minute, and we loaded up, and then we went there and did what we did. That was probably one of my fondest memories. But you look back on these times, and I've been sitting here looking at these times because I've got the 93 season here on paper. Still, I have those still. And we'd go back and study these at night, you know, the qualifying times. And I'm looking at some of these times with Wildfoot 5.4, and like Dan ran under 5 seconds. That's on a 300-foot long track over 2 sets of cars. If you just wrap your head around that for just a second, to think of what it takes to actually get it to the ground and get down that track. And obviously you got to cut a good reaction time, but that's huge. And it stands today. That is just over the top. But probably my 2 best years was 92, 93, because we'd always go to the RCA Dome, the late RCA Dome. And I'd always be sitting in either 3rd or 4th. And Bob would always say, no pressure, but we need to finish 1 and 2. And that's all he would say. So Andy would usually qualify, and he'd lock up the championship and Dan knows, and unless one of the drivers always left, like Jim or Andy, you never really moved up. We always called it like A team and B team racing. And I would go out there and I just spanked everybody. And we had that little 500 cubic inch, and Gary Saline said he kept pulling more and more fuel away, and he goes, it's going to be a ride. You need to just hang on. And he said, just shift it as fast as you can. And I mean, I get goosebumps right now talking about it. I mean, that was just huge. And that was some stories that the camaraderie, when you, like Dan said, when you pulled the line, all the gloves was off. But later on, if guys needed a hand, everybody was there to give a hand. It's somewhat true today. A lot of the things that happen today, the stories that they tell, the drivers that are out there now, the stories they have to tell, it's about how they missed their flight to try to get back home from the airport. It's not about going to the Petro and eating a hamburger. That's for sure.
So I'm going to say this one person, and we're going to start with Marty, and then we'll go with Gene and Dan. Do you guys have any good Army Armstrong stories?
Since I played the role of crew chief most of the time, I didn't necessarily get a lot of on-camera time with Army. He would force me to do. He did a couple of things, like we did a spot on the bypass shocks and stuff that he did, and he was really, really good about directing you, subtly steering you in the direction of what he wanted you to say, or he was a gift to our industry, no doubt about it. I mean, we are fortunate that we had the right guy on the mic representing us and making us look good during an era when we probably didn't really look all that great. There was, he had the ability to kind of, without being stuffy, but he still kind of made us look better than what we really were. I think we owe him a lot of credit.
I would have to agree with Marty on that. Army is, he would always look for the story within the story, and he would always try, and he didn't just look at the top. He would spread it across the board at all the teams. If they had something new, he was always there ahead of time searching for something to make good for television. And I remember one year we did the Dare program, and he was very instrumental in that. And of course, he brought M30 hand cleaner to the table. He gave it to a lot of the teams if they'd run their sticker on during those PENDA days. But we went, my wife Susan and myself went to his house and visited with him in Owensboro, Kentucky one time. And he's a very good painter. A lot of people don't know this, but I was looking at a lot of his paintings that he had painted on of motorcycle people, and they all had, you could see their eyes. And I asked him about that, and he said that was something in his details. And it was just like what Marty said about the details of the way he would do his announcing. But he would always paint eyes on the riders, because he said so many people can just paint a painting, but he wanted to see that intensity in their eyes. So all his motocross paintings or his flat track racers, they would have eyes actually. And that stuck out to me, because a lot of people would just paint a face shield, a hand-painted face shield, and you wouldn't see their eyes. But that was his attention to detail that made him the legend, or the man that he is today. And we do owe him a lot of gratitude. I mean, there were sometimes he'd get on your nerves. but he, the most part, he was out there for us, and I think he was what made that series. He was one of the instrumental people important in that series.
And Dan?
Well, I met Army for the first time actually when I pulled tractors back in the 80s, early 80s. He announced at the Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky, because Billy Joe Miles, that owned TNT, that was one of their premier events. And so I kicked a blower on a puller and I needed a manifold, so like that. And he went out of his way to try to help me find one. And then the next time I didn't see him probably until the late 80s, and he remembered me and we talked and stuff. But he was instrumental in me getting my truck, the one I sold, which I have back, the first Samson truck that I got from Don Maples. It went to Race Rock, and he was real good buddies with Bobby Moore that owned that, and that's how we got in down there. But one of my funniest kind of stories about Army is one of my favorite traveling companions was David Morris with the Equalizer truck. David was just a hoot. And David would say Army could never get his name right or what the town he was from when he would introduce him at a show. And so I did a lot of shows with David at USA shows, and we'd be out there parked beside each other, standing on our tire, and Army would go to introduce him, and he never, ever got it right. And David would get the laugh, and then I'd get the laugh, and I almost lost my balance in Memphis, Tennessee, and fell off the tire in front of everybody. And we just had so much fun. But Army, he's a godsend to our industry. I mean, he's one of our voices that he did so much for us individually, like Gene and Marty has said, and can never be repaid for his kindness.
So hopefully you guys can hear me. Hopefully everything kind of works again here. So we're going to go with this question. We're going to start with Gene, Dan, then Marty. Do you have any good Ron Lurch Bachman stories? You know, we try to do it with on the episodes that we have. Any memorable Lurch stories?
Oh my gosh. I'll try to keep it together for that one. Ron was the gentle giant, and he literally had a way with the kids. I mean, when we built our display program around him and put him in number 12, literally you could not go and follow him up at a Firestone dealer or a Ford dealership because he knew everybody. And we just let him go with it. I mean, he's just so much missed. I just really don't. I know when we used to go to the SEMA show, they'd always make sure Ron would go to the SEMA show, and Ron would be out there early, and he would take literally cases of hats and shirts, and he would go over to security guards, and he would just start talking to them. And usually at the SEMA show, and Marty's been there, Dan's been there, you know, the exhibition vehicles, there's a protocol on how your vehicles are supposed to come into the building. They have a lineup sheet. Everything's done like that. When we'd get there, of course, we'd detail our trucks up to the last second to get there like anybody else. And we'd be out there tiring them up, and here comes the security guard, and he said, okay, you guys are going in first. And we just look at each other, and you'd look over at Lurch, and Lurch would just say, you know, it's okay. He was the godfather. I mean, what he said just ruled, and he was just such a super fantastic human being. I remember when I was leaving work when I got the news, and I'm still in denial today. The man, I remember him pulling Bigfoot number 4 with his 4-wheeler at Indianapolis. And it was all that truck could do, and he was bouncing up and down, and he was not going to give up until that 4-wheeler moved that truck like 6 feet after Pyatt tore it up. But he was just, I mean, he's going to town on this 4-wheeler, and I'm like, Lurch, let's just get a record. He's like, no, I'm moving. And he got it to move. He got it to move.
That's great.
And Dan? You still there, Dan?
Oh, okay. I'm next. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, man.
Losing Ron was very devastating. Yeah. Losing Ron was very hard for me. You know, I when I drove out to the funeral and stuff, I was there before anybody else did, and I couldn't keep it together. I miss him so much, and we did so much together. He was, you know, we all have our favorites, and you know, every business has their little cliques, you know, and we had our clique, you know, Gene, Andy, Ron, Mike, and you know, we just enjoyed each other's company, and we could argue all day, and at the end of the day, we just go to Matley's and have a beer and call it a good day. But you know, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many stories with Ron, but one thing we always joked about Ron, because the way he drove a truck, he was the only guy we knew that could carry the frontals across the scales. Because when he took off, he would shift like he was driving a pro stock car. And but if you traveled with him, and you know, a lot of guys would love when I would go to the same events to Bigfoot, and there would be 3 guys in their rig, and these guys would love to come back and get in my old cab over Ford because I had a queen size bed in it on air. And you know, it's almost like they'd fight to get who can ride because they get that big king size or queen size bed. If you let Ron in the seat of the truck to drive, if you're going clear across country, he's never going to get out of that seat. He would never let anybody drive. He just always wanted to drive. And that guy could slurp down more cans of Pepsi than anybody I ever saw, and then stop to get some more. But when my kids were little, he would put them on his lap and read to them and stuff. I mean, he was just an amazing man. And like I say, I truly, of all the ones that we have lost over the years, I miss him the most, and I always will miss him because he was just that all around neat, good guy.
And then Marty.
I'm at a bit of a disadvantage in this conversation because obviously I didn't work with Ron. I obviously knew him. I did a few shows with him when he would be crewing for John Pyatt. I was pretty good friends with John Pyatt, and so I did get to work with him, and he was always a pretty quiet guy. I always knew where to find him because whenever if Bigfoot 10 was, or I mean, if Bigfoot 5 was on display, he was sitting there, and you know, and he just had a really quiet demeanor, just a gentle giant. I mean, he was always very, very nice person, and just the way he got along with the fans. I mean, it's easy to see, you know, if you ever met him, you know exactly why everybody misses him so much, because he made that kind of an impression on you.
And yeah, I was with him through the Toughest Monster Truck tour, and he tricked me on getting a pretzel. I know every hockey arena has a pretzel, and he came around and he comes over to me and he says, "Man, I'm craving a pretzel." I was like, "Oh, okay, Ron. There's some. Not all arenas have them. Not all arenas. I don't think they have a pretzel." So he said, "I'll buy you a Pepsi if you can find me a pretzel." Well, dang, for sure, there's a pretzel at the arena. He just used me to get him a pretzel.
Yeah.
So, but every single time every arena I went to, I took a picture of a pretzel and sent it to him. He's like, "That's a mighty good pretzel right there." And I was like, it was a good time. I didn't know until Rente told me. I think it was at it was Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and he comes around. He says, "You got tricked." I was like, "What are you talking about? You got Lurch a pretzel, didn't you?" I was like, "I didn't know. Well, might as well." So it was all fun and games. And now I have heard some stories about Fred Schaefer, and one story I always heard is his conspiracies. Any crazy conspiracies that he had? I will start with you, Marty, and we'll go on from there. Any conspiracies you heard? I mean,
That's a really hard question. I mean, Fred was an intense guy. Is still an intense guy. I mean, he's always been the nicest, most forthcoming person to me. He helped me a lot on my book. He spent time answering a lot of questions. I've always gotten along very well with him, but I do know that you don't want to be on his bad side. And I've heard a lot of stories about people that have crossed paths with being on that wrong side of the fence. I wouldn't necessarily say conspiracies. I mean, all motorsports have a certain level of gray area where it's not about what the rules say, it's about what they don't say. And I think Fred was pretty good about identifying what wasn't said in the rule books. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Okay, I understand.
He was a fierce competitor. I mean, I do the same thing. In other words, I think that's, if you're going to be at the top of your game, that's kind of what it takes.
Gene?
Slip back to Ron there one real fast. California one time, he actually broke the air conditioner at a hotel, had it turned down so low that he had to get 2 extra blankets and we had to change rooms. The man, and he was laughing about it. Fred and Kathy always treated me with the utmost respect. I mean, they never really come off as, you could tell that he was a racer in his former before he got into monster trucks. So there might have been a few things that was going on, but personally as a driver, I never really seen it. Back then we didn't have everything that we have now. Obviously what social media and the stuff that's going on. I mean, you had to wait till so-and-so told you, but we didn't, I really don't have anything. I never heard of anything. We were so wrapped up in what we were doing that we didn't have time to worry about the other people and what they are trying. Because if you were worried about that, Bob was right behind you saying, "What are you doing? We need to go. We need to go. We need to win." So I'll take it with Marty. I'll stick with Marty on that one. There might have been some stuff out there, but it wasn't in front of me, so I'm not really going to comment on it.
No problem.
Well, with me and Fred, I got along good with Fred. We had a lot in common.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So the thing with all right. So the thing with Fred is, like, I never had any issues with Fred. I mean, he would tell me, of course, there was all this rivalries with, Fred, Jack, and Bob, and all that, and I had to try to stay neutral in the whole thing because I was friends with all. Plus, I worked with Bob, and then, but I know when Fred finally got everything together, it was the last PENDA race, of that series, where, I mean, he was running 4.5 second passes, and Bob comes over to me and says, "What do you think? He's running illegal?" This, I said, "No, he finally has got his truck balanced out, and you're not going to run with that. I'm sorry, So, so anyway, I mean, Fred had everything there to be that fast. It just took a while to get there, and then he and the second truck, they were both just lightning fast that weekend. So, but I did a lot of shows with Fred and Kathy, and I had no issues. But back to a kind of a Ron story, he and I was traveling late at night, and my air conditioner was acting up or something in my tractor, and we stopped for the night at a rest area, and he had the blue motor home and opened up the door, and I literally saw frost coming out of the door when we opened the door up. And I said, "My gosh, how cold it is in here? It's like 40 degrees. He said, "That's perfect." And so I went in there, and he said, "Well, just put some more blankets on." And so I put all
these blankets on, and then in the middle of the night or early in the morning, the generator quit running. And we were both so tired, we just lay there. And it went from 40 degrees to 100 degrees in about a half hour. So I went to bed with 3 sleeping bags and woke up laying there in my underwear. So that was Ron. He liked the cold.
He'd love it here in Canada, man. It gets ridiculously cold. So, Gene, so since I want to kind of go over some of the rules that the PENDA series have. You know, you have quite a bit of the rules there, and let's even go over some of the brackets that you have there. Let's kind of discuss some of that. So, let's go over some of the rules.
Well, in obviously let's see, which one have I got here? This would have been 91. These were just a set of rules from the General Tire, and they basically went over the MTRA. You had to be a member in good standing. It went down the track, your times, how many passes you could get, how many, like you had to hit the cars. It was kind of a uniform deal. 92 was the same. 93, one of the things that jumped out at me when I was sitting here, it said like in 93, right here, if you can read this, open qualifying.
Here, let me put you on solo. Bring that up here. We have you on solo layout here.
Okay. George, in 1993, open qualifying. A lot of people don't remember this. They said open qualifying. We wanted to do open qualifying because so many people were out there saying that they couldn't, you know, they weren't given a chance to run on this series because they seen how big this series was becoming. So George just said, all right, fine, we'll do open qualifying. So we tried it in the first event. Then when Bigfoot showed up with 3 trucks, a lot of guys said, well, I'm not coming if they're going to bring 3 trucks. So then that's when we started going back to the guarantees. And then we had to run, there's like 2 or 3 open spots at the bottom, and there might be 4 trucks show up for those 2 or 3 spots. So it was put up or shut up, I guess, back in those days, because George just got tired of listening to all the naysayers saying that it was a fixed PENDA series, mainly for Bigfoot or Taurus or big barefoot. You know, it's like, no, it's like, this is racing. You either put it up or shut up. Bring what you think you can run with if you want to come out here and run. The loser side, whether it's first round loss, was not that big of an amount of money. I don't have the payouts, but a lot of guys thought, why am I out here, like Marty contested to it earlier, out here running balls to the walls, wide open all the way when I can go do a gig for a 2-day event or 3-day event and maybe put around $4,000 or $5,000 in my pocket with novelty sales? Why am I coming out here beating my head against the wall for $1,000? So it kind of separated the racers from the true guys that really wanted to be racers. And I think everybody's kind of stepped up to the plate. But yeah, I've got 93 PENDA point series here, like Lima. We've got like all the times on here that Bob used to print out for us. And
screen here.
We'd go back and study these at night, you know, from the previous day, and a lot of these don't have the actual reaction times on there. So Bob would actually these were available to anybody on the computer, because that's the timing system that we had, and it would show your reaction time just like it would be at an NHRA drag race. So we'd look at the bracket when how many trucks was there, and Andy and I, we always had team meetings before, and we'd figure, well, if I qualify here, you know, and you ought to try to be here, like I said earlier. And of course, there was always Andy's way. I'm going to qualify number 1. You figure out what you need to do from there, you know. And it's like, no, I want to be number 1. And we'd always fight. And there were several times, and I remember in Canfield, which I've got it here, and I kept coming back as the fast loser, and we run 2-way radios back then. And my 3rd time running him, I was just getting tired of running him. And we're pulling up the stage, and I keyed my mic up, and I said, excuse me, sir, do you have any Grey Poupon mustard? And you could just see Andy over there laughing so hard, and I smoked him then. And, you know, it's all about getting in people's heads. Gary Porter used to get in everybody's heads. I mean, I mean, there's a ton. I just can't believe that I have this stuff. I just found it the other night outside. I mean, but it was, when our ultimate goal was to have open qualifying because that's what Everett wanted to do. We wanted to have like 20 trucks show up. Well, if 20 trucks show up and say Bigfoot brought 3 and Barefoot brought 3 and say Halls back then, if they would have had 3 or 4, a single truck team's not going to come and run for $1,000 to try to do that. And I just think that it had the makings, and it took it to the next level, like we talked about earlier. I wish the Pro MT would have had the expertise. They had the bones, but the people that was behind it, with the venues that they were working at, didn't want to put the effort that I think that the special events people put forth and try to make it another truly racing series. And I mean, but again, when you're running 5.5s and 5.4s back then in 1993, that was huge. I mean, I still look at these times and I just can't wrap my head around it. Even what Dan's Hemi and running the times we ran, it's mind-boggling. In 300 feet, and when you tell a person that in 300 feet, and they go out there and mark off 300 feet, and they think, in a 10,000-pound vehicle, yeah, over 2 sets of cars. Put that in perspective, and it really makes it worth what we were doing back then. And it's obviously we've talked about it for over an hour now about PENDA, and they were huge. They saw it and they wanted to get in the forefront of it, and I was a representative for PENDA as much as I was a representative of Bigfoot, and without them, that series would have never survived as long as it survived.
So, outside of the main racing itself, the camaraderie that you guys had, any jokes that you guys have done, just some funny stories in general about the times during after the races and stuff like that. If Marty, you want to start off first?
You know me. You've been on tour with me a lot. I'm not that guy. I kind of do my thing, and I tend to be a little more serious at the events anyway. Mm-hmm. You get me at the bar, that might be a different story. But
or concerts.
At the events, I'm kind of or concerts. I try to be all business when I'm at the events themselves. Again, the PENDA series, we were pretty serious. We took that. I saw it as a really unique opportunity to kind of prove my ability to design and build stuff, and so there wasn't a lot of joking around at those events. I mean, at normal events, the atmosphere is a little more relaxed, but at I take competition pretty seriously, and so maybe sometimes too seriously. But they would get really stressful. They weren't all fun and games. I mean, there was some heated things that would go on in the pits at times and all. But when the chips were all down, we all were kind of a brotherhood. Everybody always helped each other. There were very few rivalries that persisted in the pits. In other words, there were a few, but most of the time we were all willing to help each other whenever anybody had a bad. I remember at Truxpo, for example, when Scott Stevens took his crash, everybody was in the pits. Scott was out, but everybody was there trying to figure out how to get his truck loaded for him. I mean, it was literally in pieces. It was not one truck. It was pieces of a truck. And everybody was there trying to help get it. We all very concerned for each other whenever somebody takes a bad hit. I know, like when Gene hurt his back one time, and we were all kind of shaken up because the idea of a driver getting hurt, we all realized that, hey, this is a dangerous thing, and all. And so there's a whole different side of the monster truck industry that I don't think the fans ever really get a good handle on. I don't know that it's ever been represented very well. I mean, as much as we try to talk about it, it's a little bit different that your biggest competitor is somebody that you share 98% of your thought processes with. It's, they're a competitor on the track, but realistically they're off the track. They're like, just like you. So I think that is something that still exists to in large part today. It's just different. A lot of the guys that you see competing today didn't start the way we did. All of us started with street trucks and evolved up through all the different stages, where most of the guys that are behind the wheel today are guys that they probably hadn't even been born during the PENDA series, or maybe just then. So they don't know a whole lot about that, and they didn't live through that progression. So that's sort of what, my purpose in writing a book was, kind of to try to document that as best I could, at least from the technological side, and highlight the things that I think people tend to take for granted. I keep bringing up these things that Dan's done, because I don't think that people recognize how much the industry has changed because of his foresight, in creating a business and fixing problems that everybody was on their own to try to figure out. And Dan did it for everybody, not just for himself. He was solving these issues for all of us, so, and Gene's been right there with him. He's helped him a lot, so I think we share this different perspective than maybe a lot of the current fans and even a lot of the current participants have.
Oh, okay. Gene?
Joking.
Went a little long.
Yeah, no. I appreciate it, Marty. Right. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head on several different thoughts. Some of the jokes, we really didn't joke around that much, just like Marty said. There was a time after I left that they had some pretty good jokesters there, but one good one that comes to mind was when Andy and them used to do a lot of Ford displays, and back then we used to have a pulling bar on the back of the truck, and kids would always hang on this bar all the time. And so one time he took a bunch of fifth wheel grease and greased the bar up on the back, and then he'd go over and sit down. He goes, "Now watch this." And these little kids would come over and they'd grab a hold of that bar and hang on like monkey bars. And then they'd look on their hands, they'd have all this grease, and then they'd wipe it all over their shirt. And then you'd watch them walk back over to mom and just watch them get a beating like you've never seen. It's like, what is you doing? And we'd just be sitting over and laughing. It's bad. It's bad. It's really bad. But you got so tired of that we used to call it FFing on the truck, So you had to make your own jokes. And one time I shot a video that we were at a tractor pull and we were just bored out of our minds. And we used to video all the stuff. And I don't know who I was, what character I slipped into in this other third world country, but I had wrenches out of my pocket and had my hat on backwards. And Andy was trying to film it, laughing, rolling. And we didn't even tell Bob and him about it. So in our meeting, like Dan was said about earlier, all of a sudden this comes up on the thing about this guy screaming, and I'm like yelling at it, "Here comes Bigfoot down the track, I need to tune it up." And Bob and everybody's just roaring, laughing. And you had to make light of the situation back then, because it definitely it was a family back then, and your family always jokes around with you. And there was a lot of time we spent away, like Marty said, away from our immediate families, and our families was the guys on the road, and you just had to, there's a couple occasions I had a guy get his hat knocked off at a Waffle House one time because who knows what he was doing, but it's just like, really, you got to pull this kind of stuff, So it, all in all, it was all in good fun back then, and it still is today. I'm still involved in it. I'll probably never get rid of it. I mean, Cody said it the best when I was putting his truck back there in St. Louis. He goes, you'll be doing this when you're in a wheelchair. You damn right I will. And I can pull wrenches with the best of them out there, but I won't do it week in and week out. As Marty and him, he knows it can get old really quick. It's not fun like it used to be. It's fun for a while, but not pushing them in a trailer with a loader, that's no fun anymore.
And Dan?
Well, is like Gene and Marty said, PENDA Series wasn't it wasn't like doing a regular show, where you're there with a fee and stuff, and you kind of know. It's not that. It's very intense, and you went there. At least I did, and I know others did. I mean, I kind of adapted my philosophies from it, at Bigfoot. There really wasn't much joking around, and it wasn't that people were mad at each other. Everybody was there or fighting over a tenth of a second here, a tenth of a second there, and by the end of the weekend on Sunday afternoon, when you're loading up, especially with me and Gino test this week, we had almost a complete shop there. We had awning up and all of our tools out and all that. I mean, it would take us 3 hours to pack and load. So, where some would just put their trucks in the trailer and head out the driveway, but usually by Sunday afternoon, you're just whipped, absolutely whipped. And if you didn't run very good, or you didn't go past first round each day. It was more of a thing because there was a lot of tension because it's competitive. Everybody was there to do, and there was always bickering. I mean, that was part of it. And so there was always politics involved, and somebody didn't think this was fair or that was fair. One of the rules that was probably the most, they had a rule that says if you can't make a competitive pass, you can't pull out on the track. And so there was times certain teams would go up there, and as soon as the light turned green, they'd hit the throttle and they never moved. They knew when they went out there they were broke. They just thought, well, maybe the other guy was going to break too, and so they could get down the track. So there was some rules that didn't really get enforced really well, and so there was always that. And usually between Jack, Fred, and Bob, there was usually some excitement anyway. So, but that was just the way it was. But again, you couldn't wait to come back to the next one. But here's the thing is, and I'll say this kind of a side note. There was a lot of times I only come home with $1,500, $2,000 for all that for the weekend. Even we had that great weekend at Bloomsburg, we only come home with $3,000. They paid $2,000 to win a session, and so the most you're going to win, and that's 4 qualifying passes and 8 passes. I mean, so that's 12 passes down the track for $4,000 if you won everything. And you usually left that much money there on the track. So, again, but it was national television, okay? And it went year round. And you can't buy that. And so our success as far as, was based on how much TV exposure we got. And Army was always great on coming around. He shared the wealth. He'd come over and he talked to you, and he got you television coverage. So that was more of a payoff for me than it was the other. Run and get $3,500 for doing a one-night fair show like that. I did a lot of that too, but that helped me on merchandise. There was just so much over and above what you took home money-wise that helped you in your careers.
So one thing that we try to do with Crush This is kind of continue on a legacy from Jeff Richards, Roller on Monster Truck Radio. He would always ask rental car stories, and I think a few of you guys should have some good stories. So we'll start off with Marty, then Dan, then Gene on this one. So Marty, any rental car stories that's not going to get you blacklisted?
Mike probably has some pretty good ones. I'm generally pretty considerate of other people's equipment. I would say if anything else, one more recent one was, boy, where were we? Atlanta. Don't remember. This has only been a couple of years, but I don't remember where it was. After the show, we tend to go out and, let off some steam, and we're maybe let off a little bit too much, and we're on our way back to the hotel. And in the rental car, and Mikey's in the back seat of the car, and another one of our crew guys is in the front, and we're joking, music blaring and everything. And I hear wind noise, and I look back thinking Mikey's got the window down or something or other. And we're going down the freeway. So we're going 60, 65, minimum. Mikey is out of the door, hanging on the door, and he's like surfing on the highway on his shoes. And I about died. I mean, I was like, I couldn't believe he was doing it. I mean, you could just hear his feet dragging the ground. The next morning when he woke up, his shoes were completely melted. Like, he's lucky he didn't go all the way to his feet,
Ooh, yeah.
That's one that pops to mind just because that's a little more recent, maybe 2-3 years ago.
Dan, any good rental car stories?
Well, first of all, you have to have a budget to get a renter car. And so I never really have ever had rental cars. Either somebody picks me up at the airport or something. But I'll tell a story outside of a rental car thing. One thing I learned a long time ago, when they take you to a bar promotion or any kind of an evening promotion, you always want to make sure that you have a way home. And we were out west, and we went to a bar promotion up around Roseburg, Oregon, and a limo came and picked us all up and took us there. And so there's probably 7 of us in this limo, and we go an hour up the highway to this bar, and the guy lets us out, and I said, "What time are you going to pick us up?" He goes, "I'm not picking you up. I'm just supposed to bring you here." And I said, "Well, how are we supposed to get home?" He goes, "Well, that's not my problem. I'm just supposed to bring you here." Well, Andy Brass flew in, and he rented a car, and so he shows up, and I thought, good, we got a ride back. Well, you got to know Andy Brass. He's the cheapest guy in the world. And so he rented a Ford Fiesta, and we got all of us in that car, and we made it back, but it was tight. And so that's just some little handy advice here. Always make sure you have a way home when somebody takes you somewhere.
And Gene.
Well, I agree with Dan. We never really had that many pleasures of rental cars. And even when I was working for Monster Jam in the later years, I respected the rental car like Marty, because a lot of these cars do end up on somebody else's lot, or maybe my kids might be driving one of these cars. I know they say they go through them, but the king of them had to be George Carpenter and Bob and several of the guys from U.S. Hot Rod days. And I literally saw a rental car coming into Portland, Oregon, into the pit area, the back end dragging like a broken down mule. And Bob was behind the wheel, and they had went out and did something, and they got the emergency brake hung on it. And he took a spring, the main leaf spring from Bigfoot number 3, I think at the time. It was underneath the dash, prying this brake lever off to try to get it. He felt so bad because there was no way to get it back to the rental car place. It was literally locked up. And after that, I think he finally calmed down a little bit. But mine never really had any bad dealings with the rental car thing. But that thing that Marty talked about, that blows my mind about Mikey doing that, because I had no idea our paths run parallel. When I was in high school, my movie that I watched back then was called Hooper, and I tried jumping from truck to truck going down the interstate, and I didn't make it. And I held on to the side of the truck, and then my cousin was driving the other truck, and he's like, just hang on. And I'm like, I'm not going to fall to the ground. And when I got up, I didn't have no shoes on. That's a true story. And it's like the stupidest stuff we do back then. We shouldn't even be sitting here talking about it now. I mean, but those were the stories. Those are the stories that make monster trucks what they are. My days with the Breen brothers driving cross country in a single cab dually all the way to New Hampshire. No, you just don't get that now. So it's really cool to be a part of this. I only hope that the people out there that are tuning in are really getting the behind the scenes of stuff that took place back then and what really a circus it was. And we're all part of the clowns that was just trying to make it go round and round.
Oh, yeah. Just getting to shows, that's a whole nother thing. Just getting to the show was a challenge.
Yeah, a lot of times. That's a whole other episode.
Driving in whiteout conditions. I remember one time Jerry and I were left a shop. I had torn Maximum up in Fort Wayne, and we worked on the truck all week trying to get it together for Rochester. And we leave like in the middle of the night, and it's a whiteout conditions. And I'm following his dually, I mean his hauler, and we're probably going 30 miles an hour. It felt like we were going 150, you know, and all I could see was just barely see his taillights. I had no idea if we were in the median, on the road, we could have been on the shoulder. I had no idea. I was just following those lights. We were driving by Braille. It was, but you know, you have to be there. You got a contract, and you got to be there. So you do what you got to do.
Hey, driving out in whiteout conditions, that's just another Wednesday for us Canadians.
Yeah. Hey.
It snowed here where I live 3 times in my lifetime.
Oh, you wouldn't make it here, man. It gets minus. When it gets like cold, like really cold, I call it minus stupid. Like, oh, how cold is it today? It's minus stupid.
I got to experience minus stupid this year in Minneapolis. It was like 20 below stupid.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Mike Welch coming to my.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Now, Mike Welch came to my house one time, and it was 70. Okay, I said Mike Welch came to my house one time, and it was 70 below zero, with the wind chill factor, and about 2 foot of snow, and that's really rare for us. And he had sandals on with no socks, and his toes were literally purple. And I said, Mike, look at your feet. He goes, yeah, if it gets any colder, I'm going to have to put some socks on. And, all of a sudden, I didn't feel as cold as I did before. So I guess when you're used to that, that's okay.
One year, we did a show in Fort Wayne, and Steve Hess lived in Fort Wayne at the time. So during the week, I just stayed at his place. And then, come noontime on Friday, we should have been at the arena a couple hours earlier. But so I probably ought to head over there, get in the rig, release the brakes, and then the truck won't move. It was frozen to the ground, and it would not move. We tried everything. Finally, Willie had to come and bring his rig over and hook a chain to the back of my trailer. And I had just had the trailer reskinned. And Willie yanks on that thing, and of course the chain pops and smacks the back of my trailer and ruins a brand new door. Those things, just a challenge to get to the show.
Yep, the challenge. It's just crazy hearing all the stories about this stuff, because even today we all go through it today, travel along the roads and stuff like that. It's a never-ending story. I'm learning bit by bit doing the road time. Also, I came from crewing, flying to each city, but with being with the Hall brothers now, I'm learning about traveling on the road and stuff, and it's an adventure on itself. But my final question is, what do you guys want to say to these fans that are still yeah, even remembering the PENDA days. I remember when you guys first started racing, and still today that some see you guys at a Monster Jam event. Just wanted to talk to you guys. Any words to them? We'll go with Gene.
Well, first of all and foremost, I just want to say thanks. Thanks to all the fans for throughout the years and to carry on the history of the monster trucks. There's people that come to the events now that were taking their kids when I was racing, and no matter about all the politics that's out there and all the company-owned fleet trucks and stuff like that, they're just there to be entertained. And some of the drivers lose a little bit of focus on that now, and it's sad, but I think in reality, a couple people a long time ago had a dream, and they've stuck with it for all these years, and it's given us a pedestal to be up on. It's given us a soapbox to stand on and preach to preach and walk to walk and do the talk. And I just want to say thanks. I want to say thanks to all the fans that remember Colt Cobra and what he did for, whether it was good or bad. I want to say thanks to the people out there that respected me as a driver, and the ones who hated me. The late great Dale Earnhardt said is, if they're booing you, you're all right. When you don't hear people yelling at you anymore, that's when you need to find something else to do. And that holds true today. And I mean, for you guys putting this stuff together, hats off all the time. I mean, really, hats off. This is fantastic. I'm so proud to be a part of this. I really am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Marty?
Yeah, I want to give thanks also to first and foremost, Bob Chandler for, changing my life and setting me along this path, creating this incredible industry that we all love so much. It's hard to even imagine what we would be doing if, he hadn't had the foresight and the vision to turn it into a business. My life would definitely be completely different. It gave me an avenue to explore creativity and engineering, and which has touches a lot of different parts of my life, changes the way you look at things, and at the same time, I feel that equal to that, Dan did so much to shape the industry as we know it, and drastically improve it. It's another one of those things that, I'm all about context. I always look at things in the context of the time, and I don't know that people tend to have short memories, and they don't remember the days I'm talking not that long ago, when half the trucks, if you had a 2-day show, half the trucks weren't running the second night, and that change in technology that allows us to go out and screw trucks into the ground and come back for more and not skip around and just all that didn't happen by accident. That was a lot of hard work, a lot of engineering, a lot of time identifying the problem. It's not just the solving the problem. First, you have to identify that there is a problem. A lot of people just, you break something. The mentality is you break something and you just replace it. And Dan was very good at seeing that maybe it's not, we need to replace it. We need to come up with a different solution. And I have an utmost respect for that type of mentality. And Gene, for as long as I've known him, and even before I actually met him, he has been an entertainer. He's an entertainer in front of the camera, behind the scenes. It doesn't matter where. He's always kind of the life of the party. If any of you have ever spent any time with him, personal time, he's just a joy to be around. So, I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to do this. And then the fans, of course, the fans. I hear a lot of people kind of maybe sometimes maybe be a little hard on the current state of monster trucks. Just recognize that we all love trucks. I mean, and these guys, it's not their fault that they weren't born back then, and they're not as old and wise as us on here, right? I say that jokingly. You know, they're doing their part as best they can. I know that the crews, you know, they have their heart in it. They work really hard. They're the guys that don't get any glory at all. They're out there busting their butt behind, you know, in the pits, sleepless nights, just like you know, that's why I have so much respect for like Cody Saucier, because he earned that seat. He started just like we did. He worked his way up there and to the top of the sport. You know, I love seeing him do as well as he has. He created a name for himself. Nobody gave it to him. He earned it. You know, and so, you know, I just ask fans today to you know, I you know, to recognize those guys that work really hard to go out there and entertain you. It's not easy. It's not all glamour. It's, you know, it might be glamour for the guys that get the camera time on, you know, but for the guys that are busting their butt in the back, it's just they're doing it because they love it. And finally, I want to, you know, thank each and every one of you for, you know, 31 years of support for Team Overkill.
And Dan.
Well, I'd say it's hard to top. I mean, I say, you know, what Gene and Marty have said. You know, I got in the industry a little bit differently. I was looking to try to figure a way to make a living for a couple of years, and I guess it worked out for me. So I kind of thought, you know, with the cycle of stuff back in the day, things would kind of go through a 3 or 5 year cycle. Then you kind of moved on to something else. And here it's been 30 plus years for us. I feel like I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet to not really know what I wanted to do at one time to, you know, what this has become. I didn't have Marty gives me way too much credit for things that I do. I didn't really have any kind of a game plan on, okay, year 1 we're going to do this, year 10 we're going to do this. You know, we just always hoped that this thing would progress and become what it has become today. Even at 65 years old, I still get up in the morning and love to go to work. I don't feel the best in the morning when I go to work, but things kind of have to loosen up a little bit. But, you know, sometimes now I wish I was 30 years younger because there's so much more I want to do, you know, and what I'm doing now with this pandemic that's going on. There's products that I'm developing now that hopefully when things are back up and going, that, you know, the products that I haven't been able to develop because of time restraints, because there's only so much you can do in a day. And, you know, back in the day when we built a truck, I spent all week with a pattern torch making all the brackets, and now all that stuff done in an hour on a laser. But, you know, the industry has just been very good to us and my family. Fan-wise, I am so amazed how these young people know so much about the history of our industry, and I was there and I don't remember these things. So it's really great. I mean, you know, our customers in out of the country, Europe and Australia and stuff like that, you know, to see something that 30 years ago, we, you know, when we would say, well, we race monster trucks, and people would say, there's a need for that. And to now, when, you know, it's mainstream now, you know. And so the thing is, and Marty and Gina, you know, it's not who we become. We're always reminded who we're not, and which is fine. I'll take that criticism, and that makes us stronger and makes us grow more. So, and to Cheech and all these people that are doing these podcasts and like that. It's really great. I've done several, and I'm really enjoying it because I leave really educated after it's over. I should really get a little more technical about things instead of holding my phone in my lap, on my belly, facing me. So I'm sure tomorrow Allison will be telling me about how she got dizzy watching me hold the phone. So anyway, in the path that I have been down with, my relationship with Gene, and one of the best dinners I've ever had was with Marty 2 years ago down at his hometown, where we just sat there and we could have sat there for 2 days and talked. And I miss those kinds of things, and I enjoy those kinds of things. And because Marty and I don't cross a lot, our paths don't cross a lot, so we don't get to do this. And when we talk on the phone, it's always an hour and a half, and you still would like to talk more because he's so knowledgeable and so intelligent and so sharp with everything he does. I feel like I'm not trying hard enough after I get off the phone with him because he's just so good at what he does. So I mean, I could go on and on and on, but our fan base is phenomenal. And again, I'm just so blessed. And if it ends tomorrow, I couldn't be any more happy what this industry has been able to do for my family and myself. And hopefully I contributed enough, over the years that people think that, me being here was worthwhile.
And I'll say this, to you guys as, a 29-year-old man, and also for the little kid sitting in front of the TV watching TNN being amazed. Thank you, all three of you. You guys created so many memories for me as a child and as Dan as well. Being able to hate Colt Cobra and, because I was an Andy Brass kid, I was like, always cheering. And then, I remember when Gene, you stepped when you stepped foot into the Bigfoot truck, I was like, wait a second, that voice is very familiar. and for Dan as well, being very competitive back then and always being a class act, and one of my all-time favorite trucks, the design of it, still reigns to me today with all my graphic design. The paint jobs that you've had throughout the years have been just phenomenal, and always like one of my favorite trucks to see. And Marty as well, for being such an innovator in the sport, and still within the sport with Overkill Evolution. And all three of you guys, thank you for I never thought in my wildest dreams when I started this podcast 5 years ago with Cheech that I'd be sitting here talking to some of my heroes. So thank you guys, and thank you Cheech as well for putting this all together, man.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
There you go.
It's been an honor.
There's this one for Marty. There's one for Dan. Yeah, that's retired monster truck money right there. That's what that gets you right there. That's how much you got big and big.
Oh man,
I'll let you know that I should have been in bed 2 hours ago. So remember, you guys kept me up awful late tonight.
Yeah, and thank you guys for taking the time out of your nights, and hopefully we can do this again and have some more people, and if somehow we can get Andy Brass on here, man, that'd be insane.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure again, and listening to Marty, I love the book too. There's just so much history out there, and these type of discussions that we're having right now, they happen in November at the Monster Truck Hall of Fame. There's groups all around, and there's stories like this. Go back to Cody Saucier. When I'm on the road with him, if I'm crewing for him, he'll bring his phone up and he'll say, "What was you thinking about this? What was you thinking when you was doing this?" And it's like, I don't know. Let me go to sleep. And it's like, these guys get it. And there's a lot of them out there that get it. Andersons, they get it. And I'm just so proud to be just a small part of this massive industry that we are all living in right now.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for being on. It was a great honor to have you guys on. Really a lot of in-depth information about the series and also some behind the scenes talks, and much appreciated. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that's it.
All right.
All right.
So thank you for being on, and once again, want to thank Joe Sylvester for High Octane Coffee, Marty, your book. Thank you, Jay Concepts, Nick Davis for Back Channel Productions. He's the one that did our intro video, and he's also has done a lot of video footage for all these guys, and also JB Scale Graphics. They have done a lot of the RC decals for Overkill Evolution, Bigfoot, and other teams that he has dealt with. And also 6B Apparel for this uniform. So, folks, want to say thank you again for being on. And the cool thing is, I'll see some of you folks at Bloomsburg. I'll be going there this weekend. So
just remember, winners never quit and quitters never win. So you guys are doing a great job. Everybody out there, just keep it up. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, Brad, you ready to do your saying?
Thanks.
Yeah. So, as we always say on Crush This and Mushroom Podcast, keep the rubber side down, the shiny side up. I normally do peace, but since you got Cold Cobra here, got to bring out the fangs. All right, guys, take care, and we will be back on Thursday. So, Cheese will announce who we're gonna have on Thursday, and yeah. All right, guys, take care.